Survivor Specialist Phil and Alexa are back, minus Alexa, as everybody can see. It's a Monday. We don't have Alexa right now because of work issues, but she will be back for the next time that we go live with one of these things. But I'm hosting this one all by myself, and today I'm joined by the man behind the curtain of the entire Russell Hantz Top 100 Survivor rankings. It's the co-producer and editor. I know everybody's been talking about how great everything has looked on all these videos. We're already 4 in, 6 left. Adam Jumba, thank you so much for joining, man. Great to have you.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And thanks to you and Alexa for all the help so far. It's been an absolute blast putting it all together, and, all the fans that are watching, and yeah, it's been great. We've got some great responses. Of course, everyone's got, some people higher, some people lower, some people perfect, but it's been great to hear all the feedback so far. So it's been a blast.
I would love it if we found that one person who thought that this top 100 was the perfect list. It's 100 to 1. Like, I love that. Every time you rank somebody anywhere, they'll be like, oh, that's too low. And then, you'll have Andrea at 68 and somebody will be like, oh, that's too high for her. And you'll be like, well, where do you have her? Oh, 71. It's like, It's in the same ballpark. I mean, that's not really too high or too low here. That makes sense. It's kind of like me with Eric Reichenbach. He comes in at 70 on the official list. I have him at 63. I'm like, that sounds like a pretty good spot for Eric. I can't really complain too much because it's not like that far away from where I thought he would go. But I mean, everybody has their own takes. And what have you noticed? Because I know you're always in the chat when they're live and everything like that. Who do you think's been the most controversial one that they've had so far?
So if I had to pick the most controversial one, it was probably Tommy Sheehan, who I love, and I had him around the number he landed. But and I'm sure we'll get into this later on. But my personal list, what I ranked it was a little bit of everything, but I tried to focus a lot on how memorable and iconic that person was, and also if someone had an impact on the game of Survivor itself, I gave him a huge boost on my list. So people like Yao Man and even Bob Crowley, I think, were higher on my list because of that aspect. So obviously winners like Nick and Wendell and Tommy, the more recent winners, I had a bit lower just because their impact on the game hasn't really been felt yet because they're so recent. So it's almost kind of the opposite of recency bias. But I think Tommy and Nick have been probably the most controversial, although Andrea probably is the one where I think no one can agree on, because probably about a third of people said, how can Andrea be anywhere close to the top 100? About a third of the people said she's top 40. And then there was a good bit that was like, oh, perfect. Well, 68, I think she was. People were saying that's perfect. So as far as who seems to have been the lowest, Tommy, but overall, I think Andrea's had the most reaction so far.
I have Tommy super, super high. And this is good too, because I know a lot of people have been asking all the time when it's Russell, Alexa, and I, who were the other 2 people who are part of this ranking? And now you have one of the answers. Adam was one of the 5 people who did submit a ranking. Pretty much, I think you're the one who compiled everything. So what the hell am I saying? Submitted a ranking. You submitted to yourself. And you're one of the 5 people, though. And I think it's interesting to actually hear what your perspective was when you were ranking, because everybody always asks, and I'm very vocal about it. I really base it on the first time you played Survivor, how well did you do? And then if you are like a Sarah Lucina and you win it your second time, how impressive was that win that it offsets kind of what you did your first time? And like, how does the legacy expand? So that's how I do it. And I had Coach all the way down at 79, and Russell almost blew a gasket on the podcast. But that's just kind of how I view it. And I think everybody has a different perspective right now of how they feel about this. And I think that's something that people are learning even as they see these lists become unveiled. Their own thinking is not going to line up even with mine or yours. Even if they agree more with one of us, it's not going to just line up perfectly. It's just never going to happen.
Right. And I think what a lot of people are forgetting is, one is that there's been so many contestants. So just even if you're number 100 or 98, that's still a huge compliment. Like I've had a few people text me that were in the 90s range that were like, thank you for putting me on. And then I think the other thing that people forget is there's really no formula for what makes a survivor a good player. Because at the end of the day, this list is the greatest survivors. So, like you said, you base yours more on how well they play their first time. Alexa, I know, was more character based. I think Russell was more on like the big move type person. And then Corey, to free up the speculation, Corey was the fifth and final member of the list making panel, and he is a Survivor super fan. So he based his list based on the perspective of just that, of a super fan. So, I think entertainment value and character went in a lot to his opinion. So it was nice compiling them all. And a quick shout out to Denise, Russell's kind of assistant with the Patreon group. She averaged out the placements, which I know took a lot of time. So if you're watching this, Denise, thank you for compiling the master list.
And she messed up Troyzan's, right? We can all now blame Denise for putting Troyzan at number 100. We all have a face now.
So Troyzan, I was checking the lists, and Troyzan showed up on 3 and didn't show up at all on 2. So I think his placement was warranted. I'm glad he's in the top 100 though, because I like Troyzan a lot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I'm assuming then too, because you had said impact, and we'll get into kind of breaking down 70 to 61 here, but you had said impact. Did you have Boo Burness higher up, not necessarily because of his impact on the actual season of Survivor Fiji, but more on his impact of just what he did for the show?
Right. Yeah, of course. I think there was that record that he has that, to be honest, I didn't know coming into the game. Boo let me know about his record whenever we interviewed him. But no, for those who didn't know, that was 100% true. Boo does hold the record for the most total wins in one season. So I think that he maybe wasn't the first person in Survivor history that was, a physical threat. We got to get him out ASAP. I'm sure that came up many times before, but I think he definitely added to that strategy that we still see with players today. So
yeah. And I love like the actual breaking down. If you're a fan, and I'm going to shamelessly plug myself now, become a patron of me and Alexa, patreon.com/survivor specialist. Right now, what I've been doing is I've been breaking down, because people always ask me on Twitter and all that stuff, why did you rank this person here? Why did you rank this person there? And when you don't actually get to sit down and talk about it like you with Boo, people just sit there and go, how the hell is Boo ahead of Troyzan? Who is Boo? And so what I've been doing on our Patreon is every day I've been releasing episodes about my top 100 players. I actually just recorded the Eric Reichenbach one today, which was my number 63. And I think that one's going to come out on Wednesday. So I'm recording them ahead of time. Everybody, if you've been a patron of the Survivor Specialist for the last 2 weeks, you've been getting 2 episodes a day, sometimes 3 episodes a day. So if you're looking for really fun content, go become a patron. It's every tier except for our lowest tier that you can get this daily content. And Alexa and I have plans to keep it going with both of us moving forward, not necessarily about a top 100 players, but we've come up with some fun things even our patrons don't know about. But I think it's important to put the perspective, because there's too many times where it's just, hey, I really like this player, so I'm going to rank them at 14. And then everybody goes, okay, well, how could you put them above this person? And you give a 140 character response, which nobody can really get much out of, because half the people who are asking you anyway are trolling you. So I appreciate the Boo thing, because Boo was not on my list. And that's why I was really shocked that he ended up higher than Troyzan, because I was like, well, who would put Boo higher than Troyzan? But it makes sense based on what your criteria was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's jump into though our personal list for our 70 to 61. And I don't know if there's anybody who was in like your first 30 that we haven't talked about. I know you mentioned Tommy Sheehan. I don't know if there's anybody else that you want to be like, hey, they didn't make the list, but I feel like I should give them a shout out or something like that. If there's anybody from 100 to 71.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at on my screen now. I have the master list, and then I have all 5 of the lists separately. So I'm trying to look at mine. To be honest, I've kind of been lucky. I think I've had a lot of people in my 100 to 70 range that have showed up so far. I think Susie Smith was someone who I had in the 80s that didn't make it on the list, but I wouldn't say there's any shocking. Jeff Varner I had in the top 80s.
I would say based on an impact part of the game, you definitely should have him in your top 100 if that's one of the things you're basing on, for sure.
Mhm.
Well, who was your 70 then? Who was your number 70?
Right. I had Courtney Yates at 70.
I love that. I mean, I'm never going to complain about Courtney Yates. Now, you and I are going to disagree heavily on our placements of Courtney Yates. I have Courtney Yates so high that you guys can't see her if you stand on the ground. I love Courtney Yates, but she's somebody who I feel like she's like the earlier version of Andrea, where Andrea is the player where it's like she doesn't belong or she should be top 30. I feel like Courtney's probably going to appear on everybody's top 100 list. She's going to appear pretty high on this list, but where I have her and where you have her is really nowhere near each other. Because I don't want to say where I have her.
Right. Well, what's interesting about Courtney is, for those who don't know, and I'm not sure if this story is 100% true, but apparently one of the casting directors from Survivor was in New York City at a restaurant, and she was interviewing another contestant who's escaping me who it was, but the story goes that Courtney was yelling at the waitress or something, or yelling at the barista.
She is a waitress, and she was yelling at somebody who was dining at the restaurant, I believe.
Right. Yeah. So she had never seen Survivor coming in, and it's always amazing to me, these players like Phillip, who had never seen an episode once before coming in and somehow made it. Rodney on Worlds Apart, who somehow still make it all the way and pick up the game so quickly. And Courtney was one of those. So, not the best showing on her return season, but she definitely deserves to be on every top 100 in my opinion.
I actually think, from my opinion, because I think her first showing was phenomenal, and I think her second showing didn't do anything to ruin her legacy. Because I don't think anybody had expectations. The best quote ever is her quote in the pregame press for Survivor Heroes versus Villains, where she was like, "I'm going to a dogfight wrapped in bacon," or something like that. Like, I forget exactly what it was, but she knew she didn't belong there. She should have never made it as far as she did in Survivor China. So to come back for Heroes versus Villains,
right?
If they don't have such a long pre-merge, she makes the merge, and who knows what happens. She could have went all the way, because I doubt they were going to have sit on this barrel and hope it doesn't spin on you again, like they did in Survivor China for her to win the immunity challenge. So I think she could have lasted a very, very long time. And I'll have so much to say about Courtney in about 5 weeks, and we can all have that conversation then. But I really love Courtney. Do you want to maybe just rattle them off so people can get an idea, since we've been following along with Alexa and Russell? I don't think that they'd have a problem with it, since they were doing it anyway. Do you want to say what their 70 was, since you have it in front of you?
Yeah. Let's see. Alexa was Janet from IOI. Corey's was Jay Starrett.
Okay.
Starrett. And Russell had, and this is a shock to me because I had him way higher than this, but Russell had Mike Holloway down at number 70.
That's crazy. He had Mike Holloway and Chris Doherty way too low. like the Chris Doherty one, I texted Adam while we were live with Russell still, and I was like, please tell me Chris Doherty's not in this next video, because that would be criminal. Like, that would, I mean, I feel like there's some winners that they didn't play a similar style. And of course, now I'm speaking for Russell when he's not here, but I feel like they didn't play a similar style to how Russell played.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think for him, he's just like, well, like, I mean, Mike Holloway was one of those. I don't think if you're talking in terms of like huge, larger than life character and everything like that, I think he's kind of missed the test of time. I think he's already not past it. I know a lot of people wish he would have been on Winners at War, but I think they only wish he would have been on Winners at War because he wasn't on Winners at War. I don't think beforehand everybody was clamoring for Mike Holloway.
Right.
So I think he's already kind of not past that. And as I said, I have Eric Reichenbach, which is my 70 comes in, or no, mine is not Eric Greigenbach. Eric Greigenbach is the real 70. I'm looking at the wrong list here. My 70 was Jerry Manthe, the man-eater, because she has a great arc, but if you really look at her first 2 times playing, she sucked. And then her third time is so amazing that I move her way up in my rankings. And because she's such an iconic character, I mean, nobody could go through this without having Jerry in their top 100 list. I felt like 70 was a pretty good spot for her, because she's one of those rare people who goes from never having a chance to win to all of a sudden, like, being 1 vote out away from possibly winning Survivor in the craziest season of the show. that would have been pretty awesome. So I landed her at 70, one of the rare instances where I reward somebody based on their third showing as opposed to their first two.
Right. No, absolutely. I think I had her. It might be a few more weeks till Jerry shows up, but
which makes sense because for Classic Survivor, there's no better female character than Jerry Manthe, and I think she is the Rushmore of female survivors in the first 10 seasons until Stephanie LaGrossa probably.
Yeah. No, I agree. And just to comment real quickly on Eric, because I think he was one of those spots where a lot of people were like, I feel like a few people that are going to show up on the list that people think are low are going to compare that to Eric's spot. Like, how can they be ahead of Eric, or how can Eric be ahead of Tommy, or how can Eric be ahead of Troy Zan? But to just play devil's advocate for Eric, and I know you mentioned this in your interview when I asked you about Eric, but without Eric's immunity move, Parvati may not have won that game, and Sari, Parvati, and Amanda, who I'm sure this isn't a spoiler, are all three going to be super high up on this list. They might not be top 20, any of them, if not for Eric's move. And, he gave up immunity his first season and got medevaced, in the finale of his second season. And if people forget, Jeff would always ask, do you want to give up immunity? So if you're talking about impact on the game, it's a very subtle change. But I think after that moment, Jeff stopped asking, do you want to give up immunity?
It essentially was the rock draw in Marquesas where it completely changed people's outlook on the game. And like I said, I just did my Eric Reichenbach thing for the patrons, and I don't want to give too much away because the patrons earned that. But I will say that I talked about, he was on a 3 individual immunity win streak at that point. He would have won the game. I firmly believe Eric Reichenbach wins Survivor Micronesia if he doesn't give that up there. Agreed. Because he's in the final 4 with Amanda, Parvati, and Sari. We know Sari's not beating him at a challenge. Amanda and Parvati maybe, but people forget Eric Reichenbach, because in Caramoan he wasn't, but in that season he was an absolute beast in terms of challenges. And so I always think Eric is one of the most underrated players in the world because all we talk about is his worst moment. And it's a shame because I feel for him because we never had a satisfying conclusion to his game. We never did, and we never will, because I don't think he'll ever play again. Because as soon as Caramoan was over, he was like, "Hey, CBS," and he gives them the big middle finger, and he does like the hey. But that's just he was pissed off at what happened, and I don't blame him. So back-to-back 5th place finishes, like that's a top 100 player, especially when you have as big of an impact on the game as he did. Who was your 69?
My 69 was what do we got? Lost my spot. My 69 was Brad, who was only two spots away.
Yeah, that's not bad. I had Brad at 73. So I think Brad is probably one of those people who like comes in at the spot on the list where everybody actually believes Brad belongs.
Right.
Now, question for you, because I didn't have Monica on my list. Did you have Monica or Brad higher?
I had Brad higher for sure. Yeah. I actually got lucky this week. I know once we start revealing picks, you might think that I maybe changed the list a little bit to match mine, but I got really lucky this week. A lot of my placements are very close, and it's only for this week. But a lot of my placements were close. But no, I had Brad at 69. I mean, I think Brad, 5 immunity challenge wins. I think me and Russell did a video together where we compared first time playing and second time. And honestly, I think Brad had one of the best one of the best comebacks that we've ever seen between Blood versus Water and Game Changers. So I think, and he only lost by what, a vote or two in Game Changers?
I think he lost by 3 votes. I think it was like 5-2 or something. Like, I forget exactly how it turned out, but I think it was 6-3. And had he not been so mean to tie at the end, he probably ends up winning the game. And also, I think that his Blood versus Water game isn't that bad of a game. It's just we needed a villain, and that's what I keep talking about when I'm doing my rankings. Like, there's some editor dreams out there. Like my number 69 is Bob, but I'll jump to my 68 real quick just to make this comparison while we're talking about Brad. My 68 was Spencer Bledsoe. And everybody, like, I feel like that's like my most controversial, aside from the person who I haven't ranked, who only my patrons know and nobody else knows yet. And you know, Adam, because you probably did Control F on their name and were like, oh, maybe put first name, last name, spelled it wrong, whatever. But when it comes to somebody like Spencer, you have the ultimate survivor villain on his tribe to start, and he's losing. So he's the underdog. He's a great character, blah, blah. But then we see him play again, and it's like, well, maybe he wasn't that good of a player. Maybe he was just an easy person to make a hero. Brad is the opposite of that. I feel like Brad was just an easy person to make a villain because it shows Monica's arc of having to overcome her overbearing jerk husband and everybody. F you, Brad Culpepper. How does Monica get to final two after all? I feel like when you look at it from that perspective and you take that and then you look at the way that these people play their second time, you can actually tell whether it was just an editing trick or it really was the way they play. And I think Spencer and Brad are on the opposite ends of that spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Go ahead.
Who was your 69? Who did you say?
My 69 was Runaround Bob, who ended up coming in at 62 on the official list. He was my 35th winner, and I was saying this. I have him in like a league of his own. I feel like I have Bob, and then I think I go 30 or 17 spots. I go 17 spots before I hit another winner. So my next winner doesn't come till spot 51. And but I don't think Bob is like a bad winner. Like I don't rank him down there with Amber or Chris Underwood or Natalie White. But it's like, what do you do with Bob? Because he played a great game at the end, which I always find to be impressive when your back's against the wall. He was very likable and all of that. But then he also like goes to the end, wins by 1 vote, and you realize like he didn't really do anything that entire season. So I have a really hard time with Bob.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually had Bob, I think 59. So what he would be just a little bit higher of his placement. But I think, because obviously, like I said, impact on the game was a huge, if not the single biggest factor in my personal list. So obviously he wasn't the first person to make the fake idol, but I think he was the first person to kind of perfect that strategy in a way. So I think that's why I had him a little bit higher than you. He was definitely in my bottom 5 or 6 winners, but it just seemed like Bob knew what he had to do each week to make it to the next episode.
Yep.
So Gabon also is one of my like low key favorite seasons. So maybe there was a little bit of bias there. But another little known fact about Bob that I just found out a couple days ago was if you don't count duels, Redemption Island duels, the highest win percentage for single competition is Joe Anglum, number 1, pretty firm, but number 2 is Bob Crowley. And even if you include Redemption Island, he only bumps down 1 spot because of Ozzy jumps way up to number 1. No, I think we had Bob in a relatively close position there. But
yeah, and I think I always look at Bob as one of the more underrated winners, and it's not like I sit here like it's one of those things where you say somebody's underrated and then I rank him as the 4th worst winner in the history of the show. Right. But I think that just goes to show, like, when I say underrated, I mean like people hate on Bob.
Yeah,
they hate on Bob, and I just sit here and I'm like, why? Like, what did Bob, like, I admitted this one on the Winning Survivor podcast, which we're gonna be doing right after this with Once Upon an Island. And I said Bob was the first player to ever play the game that was my favorite on day 1 and won the game. I loved Bob. Bob was just like, and to be 57 years old and win, what does he win? 3 straight immunities at the end or 4, whatever it is. He makes the fake idols, all that stuff. It's really impressive. I mean, he had a lot of flaws in his game, you know, the Randy stuff and whatever, but he had enough good that he pulls out the win and pretty much saves that season. I think if Susie Smith wins that season, oh man, there was no salvaging if Susie Smith, and I know you had her in your top 100, but that would have been devastating to my heart.
Pretty low, but
yeah,
I think she might have been like 99 on my list. So, and just to real quickly say, I think Rick Devins finished 69. I think it's obvious the thing holding him back the most is the fact that he got voted off, you know?
Absolutely. That's what I had him at 91, and I actually put Victoria ahead of him. Yeah. And while I think he had a great impact on the game, he's a great character, will definitely play the game again.
Yeah.
In terms of like actual gameplay, he was playing with house money. You know, like he got a second chance his first time out there. And, you know, he always says everybody was pissed at the end because the third boot beat the fourth boot at fire making, and therefore the fourth boot was robbed. Like, it's this ridiculous thing. And he did play a really good game once he came back in, but
yeah,
to move him, I don't know, any higher than that. I mean, if I had him in 91, I'm assuming that means somebody had him in like the 50s, 40, whatever. But I'm confident. I'm kind of happy he came in at 69. I feel like that's a good spot for him. It's not too high. I was worried he was going to be in like the recency bias, like top 30s. And I was going to be like, oh, guys, what are we watching? Right. What did Alexa, Russell, and Corey have at 69?
So Alexa had Big Tom.
Okay.
Corey had Randy Bailey.
Okay.
And then Russell put Jenna Maraska, who I'm sure we're going to talk about later in this.
Yeah, we'll be talking about pretty soon because she's at 60,
episode. She's
at 63. Yeah, I have her actually higher. I do. I mean, like I said, I don't have another winner till 51. It may or may not be Jenna Maraska, spoilers, but you know, I do think that she's like a level above. She's one of the winners who it's finally like, all right, let's really start to respect the fact that they won this game. In my top 51, I have 34 winners and 17 non-winners. And I think that's kind of like, you know, 2/3 of it is winners. I think that's pretty fair. And that other third are like the people that I am saying like, yes, these are the all-time great non-winners in the history of the show.
Right.
So let's jump up here to numbers. Like I said, 68 for me was Spencer. Came in as Andrea on the list. I've already trashed Andrea, and I mean, I like Andrea as a person. I've gotten to meet her in real life, and she's awesome. But it's just one of those things. I don't think she's a very good Survivor player. I didn't have her on my list. Where did you land on Andrea?
Let's see. I had Andrea. I had her at 78, so I would have mentioned her last.
One of me. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so somebody else. I can yell at somebody else later on. Who did you have as your 68?
So my 68, I think this would probably be one of my more controversial placements, but I had Dom at 68, and I know I checked before we did this, and I have Dom not only lower than everyone. I believe I was the only one not to put Dom in the top 40. I just think, like I had mentioned, I think Dom is an amazing player and an amazing guy, and he doesn't believe it, but I think he's a lock to return.
I completely
play
agree.
Again. He thinks there's no chance, but I can't see him and Rick. I think are the two locks, and maybe Christian Hubicki of the last couple seasons. But again, I try to do the sort of opposite of recency bias and really favor the players of old who have had, you know, an impact on the game. And I do think that the tie vote at the end bumped him up a little higher on my list because it's such a memorable moment, even though it only happens, a year or two ago. But not only do I think Dom is going to return, I truly think Dom has winner potential.
I agree.
So
I agree, especially after the Tony thing. I think that could hurt him a little bit, but I think that Dom is a really social guy, and I think that could work in his favor. I have him much, much higher, and like it's kind of funny because when I tried to rank people who lost to the winner, other than obviously in the instance of Russell versus Natalie White, that's the only instance I believe I have on here. But like I have Dom so high that it actually moved Wendell up really high, and it's kind of what happened with Boston Rob and Vesepia. Because, like, I mean, as much as I can hate Boston Rob, you know, because I don't think he's a top 3 player, so therefore I hate him and I think he's trash, according to the internet. But as much as you don't like him, you can put him, you know, you have to put him at a certain point. And because I think Vesepia played a better game than him in Marquesas, I put Vesepia higher than Boston Rob, but it really moves Vesepia up the ranks. And I think that's kind of what happened with Wendell, too, with Dom, because you don't really realize how impressive Wendell's win is until you take into account the fact that, like, he beat Dom. That's a really hard thing to do. It's kind of how I look at with Yul and Ozzy as well. So I think this is really low for Dom. I think that is probably going to be your most controversial one, unless you have, like, I don't know, like Sugar in your top 10 or something.
No, that's
no, you have a good top 10. All right.
I think not to. I don't think this is too big of a spoiler, but I think I think there was a lot of top 10s. I think most people's top 10 looks pretty close.
Okay.
So I don't think anyone had like a big surprise in their top 10.
I think, and I'm not saying this to be like the pretentious ass in the room, but I feel like mine was probably the most surprising just because of mainly who I put it 2 and 4.
It was, yes.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I think. So, yeah, spoilers, everybody, spoilers. And I firmly believe all of that. But anyway, so like I said, my 68 was Spencer. I just think he was exposed a second time out. I really do. I think he was exposed. I think he's going to be way higher on this list, and I'm not surprised. But I just think that what we thought was a great Survivor player the first time was proven to be not that great the second time. And all of a sudden, you're sitting there and you're watching Cambodia, and you're like, was Cass the voice of reason the entire time on Survivor Cagayan? Like, was she on to something here? Because Kimmy Kappenberg trashes him at the after the season is over. And a lot of people kind of had that similar mentality on Spencer, and I love him. I think he's a great character. But it was very interesting to me, it's going to be very interesting to me to see where people actually rank him, because I probably had him the lowest or close to the lowest out of everybody.
Yeah,
I did have him the lowest. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like his second game showed he got 0 votes at the end, and coming into that season, people weren't like Jeremy. Yeah, that wasn't the case.
Right.
So who was Alexa, Russell, and Corey? Who'd they have at 68?
So Alexa had Rudy, which I'm interested in hearing her reasoning, because I know she had definitely the most character-based one. So I'm interested at her placement there. But Corey, not that I had him super high, but Corey's was Ty, and then Russell had Suhawk.
Okay.
So
who was Alexa's 74? Somebody's asking in the chat. They said that Big Tom was her 74.
She had Judd.
Judd. Yeah, I remember her saying Judd. So I was going to say, I don't think she said Big Tom yet, but somebody said they were following along and they thought that she had put that. So maybe she said it, or maybe she misspoke, because Judd is essentially, she might have made the comparison of Judd and Big Tom being the same person.
Exactly. So,
well, yeah, Andrea was the 68. So I know you said 78 you had her?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're kind of on the Andrea deserves to be in a top 100, but isn't, there's some people out there who are Andrea stands, where it's let's pump the brakes a lot. We're not just going to pump them, let's hit them. Well,
I think you summed it up best with she's, maybe a slightly above average player who will always finish on day 33. I think that's a good, if she's given 5 or 6 years before her fourth return, if it happens, maybe she'll be a different player. I think she played too many times in such a small window that she really didn't have enough time to evolve that much. But I like Andrea.
Yeah, it's kind of the Aubrey thing. It's just too much at one time. And kind of even Russell, Russell ran into that problem of he never got to watch himself. Amanda Kimmel never got to see her flaws.
Right.
And I think that it starts to wear you down when you play just that much all at one time. Because we do see
Russell didn't know if I'm not mistaken, he didn't know that he lost Samoa when he played Heroes and Villains. I think they did the reveal of, in fact, I think he thought he won. I think he was almost.
They had already filmed Heroes and Villains, because I remember at the Samoa reunion, you see his reaction, and that's all you needed to know he didn't win season 20, because you could see the devastation of I just lost this one and I'm about to do this all over again, because he knew after Heroes Villains he wasn't pulling that one out.
Right.
Yeah. Right. All right, well, let's move on here. So 67 came in as Brad. We've both kind of talked about Brad already, so I don't think we need to go in any further on him. Who did you have at 67?
Right. I had Aris, and I wish I had come in with a separate list of how I ranked every winner. I'll have to do that after this, because I'm interested now that you mentioned it. But I had Aris, and I feel like Aris, Panama is one of my personal favorite seasons, definitely of the 10s. I think Aris played an okay game. I think he went up against one of the top 5 challenge beasts in Survivor history in Terry. And I think if Terry hadn't been on that season, I think Aris would have smoked a lot of those competitions, because it wasn't like Terry was crushing. Like Aris would be right there till the end for a lot of his 5 wins. And I think there was no chance Danielle would have won. I think her decision of who to take between Aris and Terry was similar to Kim having to choose from Ethan and Lex. I think either way she went, she would have gotten smoked in the votes. But and then, you know, his blood versus water game, he made the jury, if I'm not.
He did make the jury, and actually, Aris is another one. Even though his placement on blood versus water is only, I think, 12th place or something like that, I actually moved Aris up in my rankings because of his game there. And so, for instance, like, this is going to be so weird to say, but my top 100 players, the order I have the winners is not necessarily how I would rank the winners if I just rank them based on their winning season. And I think that's something people need to keep in mind, because somebody like Aris, I think I might, and I'm not going to say definitively, but I think I might have him higher than Tyson. Well, he lost to Tyson, so how could that be? Well, because his first game and like coming into his second game and having like a target and being like, nobody thought Aris was that good of a player after his first time. And I think the second time, him versus Tyson proved he was that good. And Tyson went 2 times without winning. But if you rank their wins next to each other, I'd probably put Tyson's win over Aris's. Yeah. But I do think Aris is a better player because he never voted himself out for a hot dog.
Right.
So, but it's interesting. You and Russell both had him pretty low. Maybe it's because I did move him up way too high almost because of his blood versus water game. But I was thoroughly impressed with what he was able to do in blood versus water, especially considering his brother was one of the biggest threats out there too. Yeah. So that's really scary for Tyson, you know, like for everybody else. It's like he didn't have anywhere to hide on that season.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree completely.
My 67, I had Heidi Strobel, which I put her a spot ahead of Spencer just to piss off the Spencer stands. I actually didn't do that, but I think she's a better player than Spencer. When I did this for the patrons, it was the easiest thing to talk about because I went from Spencer talking about the edit to Heidi talking about the edit. And I just think in season 6, if you go out there and these are her words and Jeff's words, not mine. If you go out there and you have big boobs and you talk like you don't act smart, everybody's gonna be like, oh, she's just a dumb blonde. She had the highest IQ on the season. She had a higher IQ than Rob Cesternino. And I think that, like, you watch how Jeff treats her at the reunion, and he treats her like she's not intelligent. And that's just not the case. Like, she is a very intelligent person. And he's like, I think he literally says to her, it's a shame your high IQ never came out on the island. Her high IQ definitely came out on the island because she played dumb to everybody the entire time. That was her strategy. And I just don't think people really understood that could be a strategy in season 6. And it almost got her the $1 million. Rob Cesternino votes her out because he thought she was a threat, not because he thought she was an idiot. So I think that Heidi is one of those players. We'll never see her play again because her life is amazing. Good for Heidi. Well done on everything you've done in your endeavors. But it really is. I mean, good for her. And I just think she's super, super underrated in the community. Super underrated.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Let me see. Russell had Fabio, who we are going to talk about in a second here, at 67. Corey had Wigglesworth, and Alexa had Sue. Okay. So a lot of Borneo players coming up this time.
This was kind of my least favorite stretch of even my own rankings, even though I like a lot of these players, like obviously it's still kind of like, it's this middle of the road. Like they're not great, iconic, like whatever, but then they're also not like those people who like you're defending, like, this is why I put them on the list. This is like I'm about to talk about Rave and Devin Pinto. And like, it doesn't really make me be like, wow, gotta wake up this morning and talk about Rafe and Devin Pinto. Like, this is going to be the greatest day of my life. Like, it just doesn't have that same effect as some of like the people that you have. Even like when I'm talking about Taj George, I'm like, this is why I have Taj. Like, I feel like I really got to get into it. With this, it's kind of just that middle of the road, whatever. And I'm not surprised to see Borneo people pop up because that's kind of how we all feel about a lot of the players from Borneo at this point.
Yeah, this is a stretch now where I think everyone on this stretch, if they would have one more good showing, would have been amongst, the greats, I guess.
And a lot of these players only played one time, you know, or like in the case of Andrea, she played a bunch of times but never had a great showing. Brad played one time and it was a big improvement. But like Fabio, Nick, Jenna, Bob. Like, these aren't players that, we've seen play enough times to really understand what they are as players. Unfortunately, Amber, who I think is ranked way too high on this list, but we'll get to that. All right, so that was 67. 66 was Fabio on the list. I have Fabio a little bit higher. What about you? What's your take on Fabio here at 66? You feel good about this one, or do you think he's too low?
I'm trying to look where I had Fabio at 71, so he placed a little higher than I had him. I'm glad we're talking about Fabio, because I think one thing a lot of people no, I'm not saying Fabio's a great winner or one of the greats. He's clearly in the bottom half of winners, but I think what a lot of people not need to understand, but maybe forget to remember about Survivor is every season, based on the cast, calls for a different strategy to win, if that makes sense. Like, at the end of the day, Survivor is not just about making it to the end. It's about making it to the end by putting people on the jury who will then give you $1 million. So some seasons have jury members that are looking for these big, crazy moves, like a lot of more modern seasons. Like, I think if Russell would have played at any season between Kagayan and Winners of War, I think nearly sweeps the jury.
Yeah.
Some seasons, the jury, you can tell, is people who value social game more. And I think Fabio recognized early on that this cast, and for those who don't know, Nicaragua is almost all recruits. Very few people coming into Nicaragua knew Survivor strategy. So I think Fabio recognized that, being one himself, and realized this wasn't going to be a game that called for big moves. So people like Sash, and others who had made, more big strategic moves, Fabio realized, I don't think that's what the jury is looking for. And so he laid back, didn't piss anyone off, didn't blindside anyone really. And, I think he recognized what it was going to take to win that season, implemented that strategy, and it came through. Now, maybe that doesn't make for the best TV. I still don't think he's amongst the great winners of the show, but I'm pretty happy with this placement of Fabio.
Yeah, I have him a lot higher. I really do. Like, I have him much, much higher, and I wasn't sure. Like, these are the winners that I tend to have, kind of, the Fabio, Amber, Nick, Jenna, and Bob. Right. That's the next 5 players that are on this list. Those are the winners that I generally have as my lower end winners. But Fabio, like, I have as a higher number. Because number one thing in Survivor is adaptability. And Fabio adapted to his situation. He really did a great job of that. And whether you want to agree with his strategy or not agree with his strategy won him $1 million. And I think that gets missed. Like, again, it kind of is like what I just talked about with Heidi. Her strategy was to play the dumb blonde and make the guys go goo-goo. But she's huge in voting out Gene. She's integral in voting out Dina. Like, she makes huge moves throughout that season while pretending to be stupid. She gets naked for chocolate and peanut butter because she knew that the guys wouldn't want to vote her out after she got naked for chocolate and peanut butter. And I think that's what Fabio did too. Like, it's this whole illusion of, if you lean into the stereotype that you're the dumb blonde, therefore you are the dumb surfer bro, you're just an idiot, he's so stupid, Nyanka's telling us, which I guess if Nyanka's the voice of reason, maybe that's not great for Survivor Nicaragua. But I don't know. I don't understand really what it is about, that if you don't feel like you're the smartest person in the room, therefore you must just be a bad player. That's a strategy. That's definitely a strategy.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So yeah, I really liked this placement. It was a little higher than I had him, but I had Sierra, and I think with Dom, I think I had Sierra the lowest. I don't think she's shown up on anyone's list. I think Sierra is a great player and a great person. I think a lot of people forget that she was the first person voted out of a all-star season. Obviously, Sierra is most remembered for voting out her mom, but another thing a lot of people forget is if Sierra doesn't vote for Laura, she still goes home. She had 5 votes against her. Sierra made it 6, and the next highest was I forget who it was, but
it's the most overrated move in the history of the show. 100%. It's the most overrated move in the history of the show.
Yeah, I personally, I think the best move Sierra made that season was going to Rocks, not voting out her mom. So, which obviously didn't work for her in the end, but it was a huge risk that would have paid off. I mean, Hayden, if Hayden made it to the end, he maybe have gotten more votes, but I think Sierra played a good game. I think she did pretty good in Cambodia as well. I think Cambodia had so many big personalities and big strategic players that a lot of them were afraid to make the big move. And it was interesting watching Sierra constantly pushing these huge name people, Jeremy, Spencer, Savage, almost kind of like trying to light a fire under them. So,
I threw her third game out. I just ignored it. I mean, at that point, like, it is what it is. That cast is such a mess. Are we going to put Haley Ford in our top 100 because she goes for it? Like, I don't care about that season really all that much unless you're like Sarah or Ty or Brad or Troyzan, then it's different. But
a bad season with a great winner.
Exactly. Absolutely. So, but when I look at what Sierra was able to do in that first season, I agree with you. Going to Rocks was brilliant. And that's why I have her a little bit. I don't have her that much higher though. I don't have her that much higher to the extent it's not in this grouping, but I do have her in my next grouping, so it's not that much higher. And then I think the fact that she was able to make it as far as she did in Survivor Cambodia is the most impressive thing about Sierra, because look at what happened to Vetus in Survivor Cambodia. And the two of them and Spencer were the three biggest targets going into that game because they were strategic players. Spencer gets really far, but as we learn, it's not because they think he's a threat, it's because they think he's a GOAT. And Sierra and Vetus goes home first. So for Sierra to still be a threat and still make it as far as she did and be a threat the entire game, I think it's really, really impressive. And if you want to talk about people who change the game, even if you think it's bullshit, her whole voting block thing that she just said over and over and over and over again is kind of how we've seen Survivor play the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that one. My 66 is Rave. I think I already said that, but it's just like he was in Survivor Guatemala. I think people actually overrate him now because of like, well, he was in Survivor Guatemala and he would have won if he made it to final three. Rave made some great moves throughout that season, was a great social and strategic player. He also made some really stupid moves that season, such as keeping Danny Boatwright around. Get rid of Danny Boatwright and keep Judd. You're going to kill Judd at the end. Like, you're going to win the game. But he keeps Danny around. Imagine a final four, or would it be a final five, whatever it would be, of Cindy, Rafe, Judd, Lydia, and Stephanie LaGrossa. Just write Rafe Judkins on the check and hand him the check. Like, it's a joke. And he took for granted that Danny would just fall apart, much the way Sesternino took for granted that Jenna Maraska would fall apart.
Right.
And ultimately it lands him in third place. I still love him. I mean, 66 is a great spot. There's no denying that. But I do think that there's some people who are like, he's one of the greatest to never win. He is, but he's like one of the 30 or 40 greatest to never win, not one of the 10 greatest to never win.
Yeah, I think I had Rafe an honorable mention.
Okay.
On mine. Guatemala was my first season, so I have a special place for a lot of the post-merge people in that season. So no, gotcha. I like Rafe, but
cool.
I'm trying to see were we on 66?
Yep.
So Alexa had Sean Rector.
Okay.
Corey had Hayden Moss, and Russell had Eliza.
Okay. He had Eliza ahead of Chris Doherty. I'm calling him right now. I'm just Russell. What the hell? He had Eliza ahead of Chris Doherty. I mean, hey, if you're talking in terms of character and memorable on the show, I mean, Eliza Orleans might be the new DA of New York or something. I don't know what she's actually running for, but she might be the new DA of New York. Like, that's insane. So, like, if you're talking about impact and like what you've been able to do with the show and everything, put Eliza ahead of Chris. But if you're talking just gameplay, I'm just gonna shake my head. Let's move on to 65. This is Amber's spot on the official ranking. I think it's way too high, but based on what you were ranking on, I'm assuming you had her incredibly high.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm super glad that I get to talk about Amber because I'm not going to say exactly where she placed, but she was by far the highest on my list than anyone's. I'll say she was in my top 25.
Wow.
And I think because me and Russell talked to a lot about these placements. If there's one we disagreed the most with, it was Amber. And I'm glad I get to defend her spot because I I'm trying to see. I had her pretty high up, and here's my. I'll try not to take up too much time talking about Amber, but first of all, she won an All-Star season, and I think that automatically makes someone top 50, in my opinion. If you're looking at outwitting, she did, according to her in the confessionals and in some interviews, her and Rob really didn't start becoming romantic till the merge. Before that, she claims that she was flirting with him because she recognized he was a very underrated player. Remember, a lot of people didn't even remember Boston Rob coming into All-Stars. She recognized he was an underrated player and that a lot of the winners and bigger names, Colby and Lex, were being thrown under, and Rob was becoming the power player of the season. And she kind of recognized, hey, if I team up with this guy, I get to go far with him, but he gets to take all the heats, which might sound familiar to a more modern audience because that is basically the meat shield strategy. And in my opinion, maybe that had been implemented before, but I think Amber played the meat shield strategy better than anyone has, and maybe has ever since. And I think so if we're talking about impact on the game, and as far as outplay, obviously, she's a 120-pound female. Like she who didn't have that much athletic experience. Like she wasn't going to win challenges, and she still won. She still won, I think, one or two. I know she won at least one immunity challenge. And if you're talking about outlast, which you can chalk up as outlast being the part where you make it further than anyone while still being on people's good side, she might have played the best outlast game. This might sound crazy, but she might have played the best outlast game ever. I mean, it wasn't just Rob blindsiding people. Like Amber was every time Rob, when he promised Big Tom final 3 or whatever, Amber did too and still voted him out. Amber was still part of the vote out against Lex. Like maybe Rob had the idea, but she still went through with it. But when Rob did it, no one liked Rob in the end. He lost a lot of him, and people don't realize Rob and Lex were really, really close coming into All-Stars. Like they weren't just, they were really close. And so was Amber and Lex. And somehow Amber did the same thing Rob did, but remains, no one was really giving it to Amber in the end. And Amber, everyone knows Amber, whether you're a casual fan, a diehard fan, not a fan any longer. People say Rob was making all these big moves in All-Stars, but I want you guys to watch All-Stars and really point out what these big. I'm really passionate about Amber. I think she's a top 25 player.
I'm ready to mute you and never have you on the podcast again. I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but no, what kills me for Amber, and this again just goes back to my criteria. Her first season, she was dragged. She was useless in Survivor Australian Outback. Nobody was like, I cannot wait to watch Amber play again. She walks out there for Survivor All-Stars, and I say this a lot because I don't think they originally anticipated to do 3 tribes. They had originally thought they were going to do 2 tribes, and then they decided on 3 tribes so they could do 18 players rather than 16. That Shapira tribe is blatantly the tribe that was thrown together at the last second. Other than Rob Cesternino, nobody on that tribe was a threat coming in. It's the only tribe that didn't have a winner coming into the game. I mean, you have Alicia Calloway, who cares? You have Sue Hawk, you have Boston Rob, who doesn't even make the jury. You have Amber, who is the least memorable player possibly on all of the Australian Outback at the time. Obviously now that's different, but at the time. And then you have Big Tom, who everybody thought was just a doof. Yeah. And so when you look at that tribe, it was so obvious that Rob Cesternino was going home first. And I feel bad for him because he got screwed just by the tribe he was put on. It's like Natalie Anderson in Winners at War. Right. But when I look at how that plays out, I have a hard time giving a lot of credit. And I don't even really give the credit all that much to Boston Rob. His best game by far is his All-Stars game, I believe. But I don't even give him all that much credit because it's not that hard to play your best game when nobody thinks that you're good. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so I think that really helped. And by the time people started to realize how good Rob was, it was too late. And I think the same thing could be said for Amber. And so when I look at what she did her first time, and then I look at what she just did in Winners at War, which really wasn't her fault all that much, but I do think the game was moving too fast for her. Even if Rob wasn't out there, I think she would have been just like Danny. It was just moving too fast for her. It's hard for me to get behind it. If you're talking about iconic, I heart Rob. Are you kidding me? Like they play The Amazing Race twice. They do this. I mean, they literally made a life because of Survivor.
Yeah.
But I had her at 97. To me, she's Natalie White 1.0. That's essentially what I see her as. But I understand where you're coming from. You're not allowed back on the podcast ever again.
Yeah.
I'm curious though. I mean, I don't know where everybody else ended up having her, but I'm sure that like if you're saying top 25, unless you're talking to, and I'm not saying that you're a casual because clearly you're not, but I'm saying unless you're talking to a casual, there's probably not many people who'd put Amber in their top 25 if you're talking about like all that. But again, this is why if I saw that you had Amber at like 22, I would just be like, crumple it up, throw it in the garbage. But I think what's important is when you do these types of conversations, now I understand why you have her there. I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with it necessarily, but I do. Your reasoning makes sense. It's not like you're just throwing something at the wall, which I think a lot of people think we did when we made these top 100 lists. I spent like 5 hours making this damn thing. So don't give me that, everybody. Don't give me that. I have Devin Pinto. Like I said, I don't really have all that much excitement to talk about with Devin, but I think he was a really good player. I think he made some great moves throughout his season. Ultimately, it came down to everybody thought that, he was the robbed winner. When we look back on it, he probably loses to Chrissy or Ben. So I'm not really convinced that he would have won, but I do think Chrissy and Ben are both great players, which a lot of people disagree with all the time. I think that they're both great players, so it's not bad to lose to one of them. So that's why I had him come in at 65. I think he made enough good moves throughout the game to really warrant this spot. Who was your 65? Did we say who yours was, or we just talk about Amber the entire time?
Just Amber.
Okay.
My 65 was Phillip Shepard.
Okay.
So probably I think I had him the highest. Like maybe Alexa had him higher. I'll have to double check, but I think Phillip is a super underrated player in my opinion. He came into Redemption Island having seen no episodes ever, and you can say he was a GOAT. I think he recognized that this season was made for Boston Rob to win $1 million. For those who don't know, all 9 people on Zapatera, Ometepe, every 9 of those people was asked, who's your favorite player? And all 9 of them said Boston Rob. And then they threw Boston Rob on that tribe.
That's why I will never, ever. He's not my top 10, kids. He's not my top 10.
So I think he recognized the season was made for him to win. So he acted like he would do whatever Rob said because he thought, well, I'm not going to win. Best I can do is second place. So let me try to finish second place. And he finished second place. And
he got the file vote at the end of the game. Yeah. Not exactly what you want to be known as, but he got the file vote at the end of the game. From Ralph Kaiser of all people to vote for Phillip Shepard. It doesn't make any sense, but no. And yeah, I mean, I didn't have Phillip in my top 100. I maybe I'm wrong, but I think there's a lot of revisionist history to some of the stories he tells. I think some of them are like, well, I knew this the whole time. And maybe a lot of that is true, but I also think that like 70% of it is still, I think Phillip Shepard is the best actor Survivor has ever had. Like, I think Coach was authentic, like all the way. Cause I've met Phillip Shepard. And when you meet him in real life, you're like, this guy's like normal. Like this is a normal. And I know you talk to him cause he's on your show and everything.
He's passionate. He's very passionate, but I know what you mean.
Aside from passion, he'll sit there and he'll talk to you about anything. Yeah. He'll talk to you about the sky and you're like, that's a very interesting thing. But I think when he went out there, he knew he was on TV. And like you said, if he knows he can only get second place, play for your second appearance. Make sure you're the first person they cast on a fans versus favorite tribe, which, spoiler, he pretty much was. So make sure you're that guy, and good on him for playing the game. He played the production game more than anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest, I think his Karamoan game was a little underrated as well, because, for example, like the Stealth R Us nicknames weren't just for fun. Like, for example, Corinne, everyone saw that she was starting to break away from the alliance and that she was trying to take control of the game, and Phillip didn't want that to happen. So he gave her the name Dominatrix, not as a goof, but to, make it blatantly obvious that everyone sees that she's trying to become this huge power player. And if you watch after he was giving her that name, she really toned down, her aggressiveness. So
just being her. Yeah, no, I hear you. Who did Russell? We only got like 20 minutes. We got left to do this and get through four more people. But who did Russell, Alexa, and Corey have at their 65?
Let's see. Alexa had Shane Powers, who was in the first episode. Corey had Christian Hubicki.
Okay.
And you had Devin. Okay. I was going to say I thought Russell had Devin too. No, Russell had Chaos Cass.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I have Chaos Cass a little bit higher than that, but I feel like this is like a good range for Chaos Cass.
Yeah.
Now we get in 64, which was Nick Wilson. I thought this was a little low for Nick. Again,
me too.
I do have him as one of my lower ranked winner players, although I do think that his winning season was good. I think his Winners at War season was bad. And I just think he made the biggest mistake of the season, which was that final 7 when he didn't go with Michelle. I thought it was just a terrible, terrible move. And it ends up getting voted out next. And it's just such a big mistake. But I still think he's a really good player. He's in my top half for sure. I was kind of surprised to see him down here, though, below Bob and Jenna. That was really what I was most shocked at, because Nick won one of the hardest seasons, I think, to win, and made a lot of big moves to win that season. So I was surprised by this one.
Yeah, I also had Nick higher, not super higher than what he placed, but no, I agree with everything you said. I think he played an amazing social game on David versus Goliath too, like one of the better, more recent social games. If there's one thing that's holding him back, I think people forget that if Pat Cusack doesn't get medevaced on day one, Nick was almost definitely going to be the first person voted out. But he worked hard for those idols and advantages, and on David and Goliath, I think Nick was a little lower. I think that, again, I tried to aim to do the opposite of recency bias, so some of the more recent winners fell a little bit, but no, I agree with what you said.
I kind of have like the same thing, but I have some of these people who didn't play well in Winners at War. I have them ranked really high still, because I was like, look, like I base it on like what you did your first time out there and how you played the game. So like people like Ethan and Danny, I don't knock so much for their Winners at War game. Whereas like somebody like Nick, I kind of do, because this is Nick's game. This is what Ethan's first time. He didn't have the ability to do it idols and all of that stuff, but Nick did. And so like, this is the game he should understand better than anybody else out there. And I feel like he just missed the boat on a couple things in that season. Who was your 64 though?
I had Ben in my 64, and I don't have too many notes on Ben. I think I'm one of those people that truly believes that the fire making challenge was unbelievable. I don't know if it was decided after the game started. I don't know if we'll ever truly know. But I do think that he was super lucky with that. I think he placed 75, 76, something like that.
Yeah, he was in the 70s. He was in last week's episode, I think.
Yeah, so kind of the same thing with Ben and Nick. They both won a recent season and then finished post-merge and Winners at War. I just think Ben, did better at Winners at War. Probably could have made it a lot further if he hadn't, quit.
I agree. And I think, so Ben actually came in at 73. So that's where he came in at. My 64 was Ian Rosenberger from Survivor Palau, who created the Karor tribe. He's only really remembered, again, like Eric Greigenbach, for jumping off the thing, and it was 12 hours or whatever, and then he just kind of quits, as we're talking about Ben and Eric and Ian Rosenberger, like a respectable quit. But he gets third place on that season, and that's all anybody really remembers. He's the first guy to win a fire making challenge at Final Four. I know earlier in the season, Bobby John and Stephanie also do it, but he's the first one to have to do it at Final Four to get his spot further in the game. He knocks out Jen, who then ends up becoming the Robbed Goddess, of course. But I thought Ian played a really good game and was a really great at, he was almost kind of the first person other than Amber to kind of do the meat shield strategy where Tom was his meat shield, except like he was so intimidated by Tom towards the end. And I think what you realize is when you go and look at what Ian has done with his life since Survivor Palau, you realize it was not an act. Like he really wanted these people to like him because he's a genuinely good person.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you got to respect them. And like, that's the old school way. I mean, that's just the way they were playing in the old school season. So I love Ian Rosenberger. I think he's a very underrated player because he's really only remembered for like one or two things. And he was a big part of Survivor Palau.
Yeah. If he wasn't an honorable mention, I know he was like 120 to 130. So he was on at least two people's.
Oh, wow. List. So he wasn't even an honor. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But, let's see. Alexa had Don Meehan. Okay. Corey had Danielle DeLorenza, and then Russell had Shane Power. So a couple people had Shane in this range.
Yeah, I didn't have Shane on my list. I didn't have him at all, but I like that he showed up. I mean, I like Shane. So
yeah, he wasn't on mine either.
Yeah, I know he ended up in the 90s, but I like Shane, so I can't complain about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go to 63, which again was Jenna Maraska, as we've kind of alluded to here. I think this is probably about where I expected Jenna Maraska to come in. I'm shocked that she's ahead of Nick. I'm kind of shocked she's ahead of Amber, too, just because I feel like Amber has more of a fan base, but maybe not as you shake your head, even though you have Amber in the 20s or something. You might have her at number 1, and I'm just going to but she came in at 63. This is where I had Eric Reichenbach, which I've already really talked about a lot. Who was your 63, and were you surprised with Jenna coming in here?
I had Jenna a little higher. I think if there's one, or there might have been one or two people I had biased on. She grew up only a couple streets from where I grew up, so maybe, and so did Amber too. They're both Pittsburgh winners, but I had Jenna, and I might save talking to Jenna Lewis when she comes up, because I was probably the main reason that she finished 61. So if you're mad at anyone, that's my fault. But
you just like Survivor All Stars too much, is what it sounds like.
It is. I'd say it's a top 10 season for me.
So there you go. I mean, that's a big take. It's like my 35th favorite season. Really? So that's a big difference. Close to that. I'd have to actually look. It's, it's no Island of the Idols or
if there's I'll try to say this quickly, but if there's one reason or one way I could sum up not minding Jenna's spot, one is I think she was greatly overshadowed by Sesternino in season 6. I think she played one of the best social games a winner has ever played. She won 4 individual immunities. And if you guys remember, not to bring up All-Stars again, but every winner in All-Stars was targeted from day one, thanks to Jenna. But Jenna,
thanks to other Jenna.
Thanks to Jenna Lewis, that is. Yeah. Jenna seemed to be the one winner that kind of slipped through, and I think she could have made it pretty far. She obviously quit because I believe her mom had cancer.
Yeah, and her mom died actually like 3 days later or something. Her mom did pass away after Jenna went home, and I remember her mom had been in remission when she was on Amazon.
Probably one of the more warranted quits.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it's probably the one that everybody can get behind.
Yeah. In Terry, I think.
And Terry, that's a good point too. I always forget. I don't like to think about that one. That one just makes me sad. Not that Jenna's doesn't make me sad, but the Terry one, the fact that we had waited so long to see him and then that happened.
Yeah.
It's just devastating. All right. So who did you have at 63?
So I had Jenna.
So you had Jenna Lewis.
Jenna Lewis at 63. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Got it. Well, then who had her so high that she ends up coming in at 61?
Let's see. Corey had her pretty high.
Okay, because I didn't have her on my list. I think her All-Stars game was great, but her first game was so bad. I don't,
Yeah, I know. Alexa had Kelly Goldsmith from Africa.
Yeah.
Corey had Big Tom. You said you had Eric, and then Russell had Amber. So Russell had Amber pretty close to her eventual spot.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And then Bob finished 62 on the. And then Bob finished 62 on the.
Bob finished 62 on the official list. Like I said, I had him down at 69. But that I'm kind of surprised that I was on the bottom end of the average there. I kind of figured that me putting him at 69, he finished like 75 or something. I thought I might skew him up. I'm kind of surprised that I was probably one of the people who skewed him down. I thought that out of the 5 of us, 3 people would have him lower than me. So, but I guess not. I mean, I don't know who necessarily might have been the one to swing him up. I know Russell had said that he had Bob pretty high, but that's this was a surprising placement for me. A pleasant surprise, though.
Yeah, I can't even find Bob on Russell's, but it's definitely the higher than anyone else.
Yeah.
Let's see, and then yeah.
So who did you have? Who did you have at 62?
That's where I had Terry Dietz.
I have him at 61. So let's just talk about Terry now, because I have him at 61. You have him at 62. He came in at 75, which I would have thought he would have come in higher.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Terry was, I could have just kept going up with Terry. Like, I really do feel like I could have just kept going up, because he is the definition of, if he doesn't get voted out in 3rd place, he wins the game. If he gets the final tribal council, he wins the game. Everybody was going to vote for him. It would have been a 6-1 win. No matter if he sat next to Aris or sat next to Danielle, it was going to be okay, maybe 5-2. But it was going to be he was going to be lights out. What was it that put that I guess kind of like held you back from kind of putting him into that upper echelon of people who just weren't able to pull out the victory?
I think when I looked at my list after the first episode came out, I looked at players who I wish I had put higher, and Terry was definitely amongst them. I just think Panama was his season, which is crazy because Panama had arguably the best Final 5. I mean,
ever.
I mean, Shane Powers, Danielle, Aris, and Terry was the standout of that season. I think if you look at the people that got their second chance on Cambodia and you rank those who deserved it the most, Terry has to be
1 or 2.
1 or 2. Yeah.
Yeah. It was either him or Savage, honestly, in my opinion. I voted for them every single time because Savage got screwed by the twist in Pearl Islands, no matter what Once Upon an Island will tell you. And then Terry, he was that close. And I always like reading. It's like if that last challenge is on land, Terry wins. No doubt about it. But because it was a balance thing, like the fact that Danielle DiLorenzo is ultimately the one that is picking between Aris and Terry is unbelievable. And I kind of agree. Like, I ended up putting him here at 61. I could have put him higher. I think I did put him a little bit lower just because the second time he played, even though he does end up quitting, he's like doing his little, I got the social game and all that. Like, so maybe he didn't have that good of a social game, which would have ended up hurting him. And maybe it would have hurt his legacy on his second time. But it took them way too long to bring Terry back. He should have been on Micronesia, no doubt. And I have Penner coming up soon, and I love Penner. He's a better character and player than Penner after one showing. Like, Penner, I believe that Terry should have been on over Penner. Nobody was really like, gotta get Penner on there. It was more of like, man, Terry just went out the way he did. Because I always have to argue this with people, and people don't believe me. But like, as somebody who's been around for the entire show and grew up with the show, Suri was popular, but Suri wasn't that popular. Terry was the most popular person on this season, no matter what anybody. When Suri and Terry are arguing, and Suri is like, pretty much now we look back and it's like, she's probably right 95% of that time. Everybody was on Team Terry. Like, it wasn't split 50-50. It was like 70-30. People were definitely rooting for Terry to overthrow this crazy, crazy alliance. So, it's such a bummer. Like, him and Eric Reichenbach being so close together in my rankings, 2 of my favorite players of all time. Yeah. It sucks that we never got a satisfying finish for either one of them. And I'm not saying a win would have been the satisfying finish, but just like even Andrew Savage's boot is a satisfying finish to his Survivor career. Like, it makes sense. It's what has to happen, but we never got that for Terry, which is really a shame.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree more with Terry. So,
and then I'll just say my 62 so that then we can hear theirs, and then you can talk about your 61 because he was my 61. I have Twilight Tanner at 62. One of the only runner-ups I actually have on this list, because a lot of times I think if like you lost the votes at the end, it's it's tough. I have people like Chrissy and stuff on here, but Twyla, I think, played a great game in Survivor Vanuatu. She just ended up with the wrong jury. And really, it came down to one thing, and Alexa's mentioned it a lot on these podcasts. It was the fact that she swore on her son, and everybody on the jury was like so mortified by that it ends up costing her votes. And I believe she sat down next to one of the greatest players to ever play the game of Survivor, which it's not an easy task. It's the same reason I don't really knock Ozzy because he lost to Yule, or Dom because he lost to Wendell. Like, you just lost to a great player. And I think that's why I end up bringing in Twyla here at 62. I think one of just the forgotten great characters of the show.
Right. Yeah.
So who did they have at 62?
Let me see. So Russell had Sugar.
Okay.
Corey had Aris, and Alexa had Stephanie LaGrossa.
Okay. That makes sense. That works. And then 61 was Jenna Lewis. I already said that I had Terry. I didn't have Jenna Lewis on my ranking, although I do think her All-Stars game was great, but I also think her All-Stars game ruined All-Star season. So thanks a lot, Jenna Lewis. I don't think she belonged on that season. I know she was a last resort because they couldn't get anybody else. Just like Amber, they couldn't get Colleen or Elizabeth or anybody to come back and play again. What do you think? I know you already said you had Jenna Lewis at 63, so you kind of talked about her, but who did you have at 61?
So me and Alexa actually both had Eric at 61.
That's so random. So I had Eric at 63. You both have Eric at 61. You take 5 lists and 3 people are that close to each other with a player in this weird rank. Like, it's not like, oh, everybody had Tony at number 1, or like, oh, everybody had Boston Rob at 3. This is a random 61 to 63 ranking, and we're all in that. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I know we talked about Eric. If there's, I know we talked about Jenna a little bit, but if there's one thing I can say, because like I said, I think I might have been, me and Corey were the 2 people who maybe bumped Jenna up a bit. One is that group of fans who were diehards between like 1 and 10 and have fallen off. I think she's one of the names that people still remember. Borneo, yeah, she wasn't that great, but I think a forgotten fact is she was the one, in my opinion, the one person who realized that Hatch was probably going to win. And, you know, in the vote where she ended up leaving, that was the vote that Wigglesworth kind of went rogue. And Jenna managed to scrape Colleen and Jervis to vote for Hatch. And if it wasn't for Sean doing the alphabet strategy, if Richard's name would have been Carl, he would have gone home and not Jenna. It was just because Richard's name started with an R, and if Jenna had brought those people together one episode before, Hatch maybe would have gone home. And All Stars, for the pre-merge of All Stars, the narrative kind of was, let's get out the winners, and that was kind of her idea. She at least was the one that we were shown promoting it the most. So I don't want to say she drove the pre-merge narrative for All Stars, but so if you guys watching are mad at Jenna's placement, you can blame me for that. But
I'm not mad about it. I was just surprised that she came in as high as she did. I mean, I do agree with you, her Borneo game, but it kind of reminds me of everything I say bad about Andrea. It's like it was a step behind. And I understand in season 1 it makes sense to be a step behind. It was season 1. But I do feel like she was just a step behind and wasn't able to pull them in early enough. And All-Stars, again, like it goes back to this whole Boston Rob, Amber. The final 3 of that season is the worst final 3 we could have asked for. When you just saw the cast, that's the worst final 3 anybody could have asked for on that season. There's no doubt about it. And so for her to get there and fall short and all that, like, I mean, she comes in and executes her strategy as perfectly as she can. But ultimately, one of her biggest flaws is that she lets Boston, Rob, and Amber both stick around. Like, what? Why is Big Tom going home? Is it Big Tom who goes home at 5 in that season? I think it's Big Tom. Why are you letting Big Tom go home at number 5? Doesn't make any sense. When you have Amber and Rob sitting there and you have Rupert, makes no sense. So that's my biggest thing, and that's why I ended up not putting her on here. And then who did Corey have at 61 and Russell?
Let me see. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Sandra was supposed to take Jenna's spot. I think Sandra got pretty sick from Pearl Island, so she couldn't make it to All Stars. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Jenna filled her spot. But Corey had Joe Anglem.
Okay.
You said you had Terry, and Russell had Corinne.
Oh wow!
So
Corinne ahead of Chris Doherty. I'm just gonna keep saying it every time.
Yeah.
Every time I hear a name, I'm just gonna say ahead of Chris Doherty. Ahead of Chris.
Yeah.
I don't know, but no, I mean Corinne in terms of like a character on. There's no denying on Survivor Gabon. She's absolutely vicious, so you can't really complain too much about that one. But so that's 70-61 here, and I mean I think it's interesting now because we're starting to get into winners, even though they're lower tier winners. We are starting getting into winners, and we're starting getting into like more of the really well known players. Like I said, my 60s is actually probably my least interesting group out of all of them, but. You know, but then once we get into the 50s, like now we're really clicking. I think Terry kind of begins my run of like, yeah, these are memorable, really fun, good players who had huge impacts on the game and all of that. But I'm glad you came on and joined today for this episode. I know with Alexa being out and then you know, it was just like, what are we going to be able to do? But I'm glad you came on so people could hear the reasoning behind the guy who's editing and doing everything for this and has had to coordinate interviews with a bunch of survivors, which I cannot imagine is any easy task, especially when it's as many as you have to get in touch with. And some of these people, you have Joel Krug or whatever is like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Thanks, Jamie Newton, actually. I was like, give anyone's number. He's like, I got Joel's.
That's the most amazing thing you could ask for, because who from season 1 wants to talk about Survivor anymore other than Jenna Lewis, and she can't talk about herself. So
we asked 6 people already from season 1, and Joel was the only one who said yes. So
that's how it goes, man. The further removed you get, the less you care. But you got anything else you want to add in here, or should I close us out?
Just next episode is going to be another good one. We only have one winner coming up on next episode, but we have 6 people next episode that came one shy from the final tribal council. So and two runner-ups, 2 second place. So we got a lot of people next episode that just missed the winner ring, I guess.
Love it. I love it. Well, that'll be a lot of fun. Thank you, Adam, for coming on again. Anybody who doesn't know who I am, go follow Instagram, Twitter, all of that at The Survivor Specialist. If you want to be a patron, go to patreon.com/Survivor Specialist. You're getting daily content if you're a $5 or up patron, at least for probably the next month, at least, until I'm done with my top 100 rankings. So if this isn't thorough enough, if you really want to hear it, I'm doing about 10 to 15 minute episodes about every single one of my top 100 players, where I really try to go in depth. It's just me talking to myself. So if you really like my voice, go and listen. I'm like those sleep time apps that you can listen to before you go to bed. You get 10 minutes of just my grating, irritating voice talking about how much I love Eric Reichenbach and Heidi Strobel. So if that's what you're looking for, go become a patron, patreon.com/Survivor Specialist. And make sure to tune in on Wednesday night for the next episode. We're going to be almost at the halfway. We'll be at the halfway point after this episode. So we're coming up on the halfway point of this. And yeah, watch Adam's editing magic at work because it's working. And that's what's ultimately the most important. But until then, everybody, Adam, thanks so much for joining. And I'll see you in 6 minutes with Once Upon an Island for our 9th episode of Winning Survivor. So if you thought I was old now, I'm pretty much a 24 hours news network. And I'm just going to lead right into the next thing with something that I have to say, like breaking news, even though it's not. So I'll see you all in 5 minutes.